Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and welcome to Life Edge. But it may not be what you think it is.
Hello, I'm here today to talk to you about words of wisdom from the eLearning Queen. Hello, blogosphere. I hope that you've been visiting the eLearning Queen, even though those postings lately have been a little dull. But that will change because the eLearning Queen has announced that she is punishing the person who is behind the dull postings. And unfortunately, that person happens to be me. So I've decided that solemnity is more important than serenity. I have lost my serenity, and I will solemnly vow to do something interesting for the eLearning Queen. I promise. So please let the punishment stop. I beg you. I implore you. I'm pleading. Now please, just stop. Release me.
And that was the damsel in distress. That was Dr. Susan Nash. Hey, Susan, how are you?
Better.
Better. Those were tough times during the eLearning Queen days, weren't they?
They were very tough times. And I was at Lock 7, Erie Canal, upstate New York. It was beautiful.
Is that where it was? I was going to ask you where you were.
Yeah, it was really great. It was just outside Niskayuna, New York, near Schenectady.
That's great. Well, so what prompted that call for help, that plea for rescue from the boredom of e-learning?
I think it was just an awareness that the going from the cottage industry to production of e-learning and different types of things was like a double-edged sword. I mean, yes, everything was at the very beginning in the first stages, everything was like one piece at a time, but then it went to a more factory model, and rigidity reigned. It was so boring. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, it's gotten worse rather than better. I don't know what you think, Rick.
Well, I think, we were talking about this in the pre-show, but I think we have a lot of things today that are run by lawyers. And unfortunately, if you ask yourself, what would it be like if lawyers ran everything? Just move to the U.S. You'll see it, because most of our politicians are lawyers. And lawyers don't necessarily always have your best interests at heart. And it's not necessarily, I'm not insulting all lawyers, though I probably am at this point, but I didn't mean to. Like the old joke says, the only good lawyer is your lawyer, but that's a joke. No, seriously, but we are running in a society right now, especially in e-learning and training, that's afraid. So when you are afraid, you make decisions that are not based on rationale or usually intelligence. They're based on fear. So if we run e-learning in a fearful way, what happens? It's boring. It's not exciting because people are afraid to take that risk, to get a little more edgy, to do something that people will actually remember. So imagine if we did something that people remembered. The retention was 80% versus 30%. Then you'd have a pretty successful e-learning program. People wouldn't hate taking the courses, and they'd feel like, this is okay. It's not that bad. But unfortunately, when you run by fear, and you run in fear of all lawsuits and everything else, and we've created a society where everybody's a victim and everybody wants to sue something for someone because they're all offended. Everybody in the world's offended. And it's like, what are we offended of? I mean, it's training. Get over it. It's a sort of an interesting thing. But, what's your take on that? You've worked in corporate training and learning, and you've been a professor. You've seen all sides of the equation. What's your take on the industry today, and as well as why do you think we've gotten here? What brought us to this place?
Well, I think one thing for sure is the whole issue of compliance. I think that compliance is good and bad. I always like compliance because it sort of assures that everybody has access to some kind of key thing. And I was just thinking about this today. I was working on a course that said field safety for geology field trips. And we're doing this partly because our insurance policy requires everyone to make sure that they've been through some kind of field safety, which I applaud because, I mean, who wants to have some avoidable mistake? I mean, we don't need to like walk into rattlesnake denning areas and we need to check out, look at the stops before to see if there's like a road washout and people are going to fall off cliffs, things like that. I agree with that. But when you start making it so rigid that everybody has to essentially not think for themselves, but just follow a protocol, so boring. And I think that's what happens in e-learning. You're following a protocol, a script that's been developed so that's completely covers all the bases, checks all the boxes, it's innocuous, and then you do the little regurgitation check to make sure that you've quote learned it, because everybody has to show and demonstrate a certain percentage of questions answered in mastery. Well, that's not really mastery.
Right.
So, because I would say that you could probably go through some of these, like a typical field safety checklist and not remember a thing when you're going out into the world.
Well, what it is it's short-term memory torture. STMT, I think that's what it is. I mean, really, because most people don't remember it later. Now, imagine if you took a course. I was thinking about what you were just saying. Rattlesnake safety. And it starts out with, hey, here comes a human. We're going to get this guy. And as they walk in, you hear, and you're going to remember that. You're going to remember that because it's going to have a little bit more. And now you're in the snake's head. The snake's into your leg. And the snake's planning the attack. And you're just clueless, wondering. And then you say, what would have happened had you been paying attention? And then you have a different way to approach a story kind of around, why did the snake bite you? Because he wanted to? Because he was angry, hungry? You killed his den? Whatever. I mean, why? Maybe ask, maybe it's because you weren't paying attention or you weren't making enough noise or you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. But, more often than not, you know how training goes. It's sort of, this is a rattlesnake. Rattlesnakes are poisonous. A rattlesnake can bite you. If you get bit by a rattlesnake, you will probably have to go to a doctor and either get shots or have your leg amputated or whatever. But it's very kind of bland, and there's no. It's very. I would say we don't have a lot of instructional design today as much as we have technical writing.
Oh, I totally agree. And then, we got like the buzzwords, situated learning. Well, okay.
Situated.
Situated is perfect for rattlesnake safety or going out to the field, because if you can just say, okay, think back to a time when you were in the field and you had a close call. Let's be honest. And then was that a close call? I mean, I had a close call once. This was in the North Rim of the Grand Canyon. We were doing field mapping. It was for a course that was required. And I remember somebody saying, Susan, did you hear all that noise around? Not really, because I was busy making sure I was making lots of noise to scare off rattlesnakes or let them know I'm here, but I'm not going to bother you. I completely overlooked the fact that there was a mountain goat following me. And it was getting ready, apparently, was to, if I had just gone the wrong way, he was going to push me over the cliff.
Wow.
So I was no situational awareness whatsoever. I was just looking for snakes.
Well, the mountain goat had been through the training how to deal with pesky geologists. and that was in conjunction written by the snake, by the way. So, but yeah, I mean, think about it. Think how much more fun we would have with training that not only was relevant. They talk a lot about story-based training because, we do relate to stories. But also imagine, contextual base, put it in context. That's a big one. It's really hard to put some training in context because they're not written that way more often than not. And I would probably say it's because most of the people don't know how to write it that way. And so that creates the problem of how do you transmit, let's take it back a step. How do you transmit an emotion in learning? If there's no emotion in learning, there'll be no retention.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. You have to engage the affect. And if I think, that's one reason scenarios and role playing in theory are good. And I do think they work. That's not that easy to pull it off in e-learning. And it takes a little bit more time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to make, scenarios random and to really simulate the real world. But if you could, it would be so much more engaging, even if, now here's another one. We did a whole series of projects. There were, I think, like 20 OSHA training courses for Southern California Edison. These are done about 15 to 18 years ago. It's been a while. And a lot of them are still in use. And it's sort of funny because the guy who wanted them done, he had a doctorate in, I'm not sure if it was mathematics or something, but he wound up working in Edison. He wanted to have fun with them. He wanted to have a lot of humor in the way things were done. So there were accents used, there were different characters, and this is really before we could do a lot of internet-based video. This is before YouTube existed. For all you kids out there was life before YouTube. But there was really not much you could do with it. I mean, you didn't have the bandwidth back then to make it as compelling as we do now. And yet now that we have all the bandwidth, we've got the tech, we've got the abilities to really do something with what we've got, it's boring. We don't take advantage of it.
Exactly. For example, I mean, so many of the little check your knowledge things are just all about selecting the word that goes with the thing. So, okay, rock hammer. There's the rock hammer. Snake. Kill. No.
Yeah. And, I like the dragon. My favorites are the drag and drops. I abhor drag and drop questions because they're usually not used where they should be. If you're teaching something material, physical, like maybe teaching somebody how to work on an aircraft engine, or a car, or how to repair a windshield, or how to figure out what tools you need to work on something. Now, to me, drag and drop would work there because now you're putting things where they belong in their place.
Right.
Or if you're teaching somebody how to put your tools away in the proper place so they're not left all lying around, and then by the time you look for them again, you can't find them because they're lost. Drag and drop would make sense, but they're usually used as text drag and drops. So now you're reading 5 minutes or 10 minutes of text questions trying to figure out, that goes to A, that goes to B. And that's just time consuming. I don't think they learn from it. I think it just irritates the learner because they are tedious. And again, they don't deal with really generational learning where you don't have a younger generation that's readers who actually relate to what they're reading.
Oh, exactly.
So that's what I see as, so we have a great drag and drop tool that's used usually in all the wrong places. And we're guilty of it too. And the customers say, I want to drag and drop. And, really? Do you really want it? Yep, no, we want to drag and drop. We want to drag the terms into the definitions, all right, or match them. People still don't learn that way. I don't think that's a great way to learn, but we're forced to do a lot of those. And I just see that as, okay, how much can you torture? Maybe that's what e-learning is all about. How much can we torture them before they actually hit the tipping point?
Well, I think a lot of it is like gadgetry and technological things. Like, for example, drag and drop. Like somebody can say, oh, well, we have drag and drop, not just multiple choice. And then that's supposedly a little higher level of technical sophistication, which is kind of ridiculous when what you really want to do is, like you said, engage the learner, have the learner really think about things, but relate it to something that matters to them.
Yeah.
I mean, that catching what matters is difficult. And I think that ties to another thing. So much of e-learning is developed with one size fits all and not really willing to customize the approach to the niche group that's really going to be using it.
That's true, but that again comes to the general idea that if we do anything that differs from the norm, the cookie cutter, we're going to get sued. So as a result, if you're a clerk or if you're a doctor, you will learn the same way in e-learning because and they're different modalities. I mean, they're different learning styles, different learning interests, but no, everybody learns the same way.
Well, and like I think about emergency, like getting back to the snake thing. Okay, so let's have a scenario that somebody does get bit by a snake, and by some happy coincidence somebody gets a signal in the middle of North Rim near Jacob Lake and in the Grand Canyon. They go, okay, I have no recall whatsoever what to do when somebody gets bitten by a snake. Okay, can I get a signal here? Is there a signal? 3 bars?
Right.
Okay, let's stream YouTube. Okay, what do I do about a snake? And like, guess what? They're going to remember that, and they're going to actually pay attention to what they're doing in the video, like amputate, cut, tourniquet, whatever.
Yeah, and they will remember that, especially if it makes sense, or even if, like you said, if there's some humor in it, that people remember things that are funny. They remember things that are emotional. We did one, I think I've talked about this in the past on a different show we have, but one course we did one time, it was only about I think it was about a 10-minute video, but the video had to show a field service worker who worked in power, a high voltage power, kept looking at her watch. She was in a hurry. She started the day late. And the day continued getting later and later and later. So at one point, she's so late that she's making mistakes. And the final mistake she made cost her life. And we actually got to kill somebody on camera. No, it wasn't a snuff film. It was just, but it was like that. In essence, we actually killed her on camera. We electrocuted her. Because...
Wow.
And you know what? They showed that to a lot of the power line people and everybody, and half of them were crying at the end of it because it had the effect that they wanted. And this training was done as a result of somebody actually getting fried by making a mistake and was killed by this. So they wanted to show, take your time. It's the old saying, if you have to hurry, hurry slowly. Take your time. Don't rush it. Be safe, and make sure that whatever you do it smartly. You don't do it going, oh my God, I got to get here. Because when you do that, you're going to make mistakes. And if you're dealing with something that's actually very dangerous, you will make a big mistake. And in this case, and it was all done, it was just a real, low budget video, but we simulated an electrocution. In essence, the camera, and the next scene is, we did a lot of light things, and next thing, the camera's spinning around her on the floor, and she's gone.
Oh my gosh!
And
well, I can't believe you're mentioning this too, though. I don't know if you remember the photographs I sent you a few days ago of the tornado damage around my house.
Oh, I never got those.
Oh, I'll have to send them. Well, okay, this is a good example of where that kind of training would come in perfectly.
Yeah.
Because it knocked down. There's only one street that gives me access to my neighborhood, and the winds. It was a small tornado with like gusts of 100 miles an hour, straight line winds and hail. So it didn't really do that much, except it did manage to knock down all the telephone poles and some regional cross-country high tension power lines.
Right.
Well, okay, so there was a fire truck responding to an emergency, got caught in the middle of that, and between two telephone poles, and the power line is draped over.
Oh, great!
Over the fire truck, and firemen were inside. So, like, oh my gosh! What do you do? And I mean, somebody has to be trained pretty well to keep everybody from dying.
Sure.
So so like these scenarios that show real life situations, and like you were talking about, showing somebody like actually paying with their life for rushing around and trying to do shortcuts and stuff. I mean, that hits home.
Yeah, and it did, and from what I've heard, they have not had any major incidents since then. That was done probably about maybe 9 years ago. So,
oh my gosh, you're giving me some really good ideas for this thing I'm putting together on field safety. I mean, I should show somebody being bitten by a snake and somebody falling over a cliff. Yeah. Except I'm afraid to. Okay, speaking of attorneys again, I'm afraid to because I don't want to give people ideas.
Yeah. I mean, but this is stuff that people remember.
Yeah.
because it's something that hits home, especially if it's job relevant. Again, it's in context. They all knew her, even though they knew her, the one who she was actually a lineman at the end, and they knew she hadn't gotten killed, but it was done in a way that they, maybe you and I would see it and you'd go, wow, that was pretty bad. But for them, it was worse.
Yeah.
Because to them, it's in total context that this could happen to me. We actually had a guy that used to work here in sales, and this is years ago, and his brother has actually worked for Edison, and he got burned in one of the manholes that they used for the electrical connectors, and there were 4 guys there, and he took his glove off at one point, and he got zapped. And major burns on his face and hands, and totally avoidable accident.
Yeah.
And that also sparked more training and things like that. But it is, when they're out in the field, if they get cocky because they think, I know it already, I've done it a million times, that's usually when the accident happens.
Well, and also making assumptions. For example, to get to my place, I had to park on the top of a hill and walk down. I couldn't go down the sidewalk that was to the access road. I had to go through people's backyards. They had opened up their backyards.
Yeah.
And I got up and I go, oh, do I have to go through more people's backyards? It's muddy, blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, the problem is we've turned off the power, but these lines are still down, and there's a possibility they're not completely dead. And I thought, well, and they put all the safety yellow tapes around and stuff. I thought,
Yeah.
it's a good thing that they erred on the side of caution.
Yeah, because you don't know. We go through earthquakes all the time here. We haven't had a big one in a while, so looking around just to make sure. Every time we talk about it, it's like, tremor time.
Lima Linda.
But you get the tornadoes, and they're nasty. They're as nasty, if not nastier, than earthquakes, because they cause damage very quickly, and you see it coming. There's not much you can do. At least with an earthquake, you have no idea you're going to get hit, and so when it happens, you're just like deer in the headlights, and you get hit, and you're done, and it's over. So it's less painful that way. And most people still don't know what to do about earthquakes here because most don't feel them that often. So it's an interesting kind of thing. How do you train for something you don't always feel? At least with hurricanes, hurricanes and tornadoes, you see it coming. Maybe not the hurricane, but you do see the tornado coming.
Well, that's a good point, and everybody knows they take your tornado precautions. And then again, this is a good example of e-learning tactics that could be useful in e-learning, but they don't use them, like K4 television. Or they'll go, you're streaming or whatever on your cell phone, and they're saying, okay, it's coming, and they have minute by minute where it's going to be, and you go. And they say, okay, Bridge Creek, take your tornado precautions now. And then they describe, go to an inner room, no windows, blah, blah, blah. They say all these things. So they're telling you and instructing you at the time that it's happening and reinforcing. And you're going to remember it. You're going to apply it right then, and you're going to remember it.
Yeah, because it makes sense, and it's something that will happen. So,
Yes.
When that happens, that makes a big difference. But getting away from the natural disasters that just make us all feel so happy and safe. On this show, we've got a lot of different things planned. And as soon as we figure it out there, we'll let you know, because we like to improvise. And but there is going to be an undercurrent of really talking about things that give you an edge. Because that's really the difference between one who can succeed and in life, in work, in public service, whatever they're in, versus somebody who just kind of gets hit by life.
Yes, and then like we can talk about like questioning the eternal verities. If you go through education, does that really give you an edge?
Not always.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
Well, especially in today's day and age. I look at what a lot of kids are studying in school and think to myself, how do they expect to get a job with that?
Oh, right.
Because half the careers offered in colleges should not even be offered in a college. It's a waste. They should offer that in just tech schools or just, interest schools, special interest schools. I mean, I'm sorry, but, if you want to learn Spanish literature and get a doctorate in it, that's great. But how many, short of being in college, you're not going to have a job.
Right.
Unless you work maybe in a museum or something, but there aren't that many jobs in those. So, I mean, that's just one example. That's, advanced basket weaving. What are you really going to do with that? And those are really trades that you should learn with a trade master or something like that, rather than in college spending $150,000 to get a degree in.
I think that's what's interesting is that's reverse of what people usually think. They think, okay, you should go to a trade school for the thing that you get a job in, and you should spend $150,000 on learning to think. But then essentially you learn basically how to please your masters.
Right. That's right. Yeah, but it's true, because if you look at, and right now, the student loans are so high. Well, education has gotten very expensive ever since the government got involved, because they run the whole student loan program now. And as a result, it's all doubled in price. Mm-hmm. It averages about $125,000 to $150,000 for a degree. And we're not talking medical degrees, and we're not talking science degrees. We're talking any degree.
Right.
And that's just insane. I also think that, and you're a college professor, you'll have your opinion on this, that you don't need to study 4 years for a lot of these careers. You could do it in 1 or 2 if you focus on things.
Well, that's a good example. I mean, geology is a good example. People will get out of school with a 4-year degree and then a master's, and yet they are not employable because they can't apply it in the way that need to apply it for, say, extracting gold or drilling for oil or whatever. So they essentially have to go through, like you said, about 1 year of applying the knowledge. That said, though, in terms of science and things, I think that they have to waste the time getting out there and learning about the rocks. And so, I mean, this kind of a necessary evil to have that combination. But then it creates opportunities.
Oh, no, and also mostly when you're talking about sciences and medical, there is more education involved because there's a lot more theory they need to know so that they can apply the practical to the theory. In a lot of, psychology, do you really need 4 years for a psychology degree? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think so. Programming, you don't need 4 years to become a good programmer. You could learn that in probably 1 to 2 years. And then you went in the gen ed requirements. What are they really about? Oh, to me, that's a waste, because that's basically having the high schools relegate their responsibilities to the colleges. Because in most countries, by the time they graduate from high school, they have the equivalent of our bachelor's degree. And so
that's kind of amazing.
And it's sad. Because basically we do high school twice. Because nowadays, they don't even get a lot of career-specific topics in the first 4 years. You have to go to master's now to get that. And that makes no sense, because by now you're 22, 23, 24. So you have much less ability to get a job more quickly, which means you live at home longer, or you live on campus, and nowadays campus living is just more party time. So you just kind of go, wow, somehow we're missing the boat on education, and it starts young. I mean, we don't have it in elementary school. The U.S. system is one of the best in the world until 4th grade, and then we decline rapidly. I don't know what we do until 4th grade, but we do it well. And high school, one of the worst in the world. We have some of the worst high schools on earth, and that's really sad. I mean, there's just, and it doesn't matter how much you invest in it. It's the programs, and then you get to college and you hear we repeat high school again. I remember when I was in college going to breadth requirements. Why do I need to take this again? I just took this in high school. And it wasn't any better.
Yeah. Well, no, that's true. I remember taking chemistry in college, and it was much worse than in high school.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
And it was very standardized and boring, and I was horrible at standardized tests. And but in high school, it was more of an experimental school, and so I loved it. So that led to a career confusion, because what I loved in high school I suddenly didn't like in college, just precisely because of the way it was delivered. And I think that happens a lot with gen ed. I mean, sometimes you're supposed to be well-rounded, and you're supposed to it's supposed to help you figure out who you are, but somehow doesn't manage to do that.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's interesting. Well, we are pretty much at the end of our very first show. So for all you guys who are watching this, this is not show number 100. This is show number 1. First show. We'll have 100 soon. But next week we've got with us Dr. Patty, another doctor. What's with you doctors? Another doctor, Dr. Patty Shank, who is a well-known author, well-known e-learning person. She's written books on Articulate and other e-learning tools, as well as she was the research director for the eLearning Guild. And she just wrote a book called Be the Best Boss of You. It's a really interesting book. I had a chance to do a pre-read on it and even got one of my comments put on it, which is very nice of her. But she'll be fun. She has a real down-to-earth style, and she's not shy. So, Susan, that's our guest for next week, and then we've got some other ones lined up, which are going to be great. So stay tuned. We're going to have some fun with the show, and as you can tell, we like to kind of go off in tangents, but there is a theme. There is an overarching theme, and we will figure that out soon. So we'll let you know what that is. But so, Susan, any final comments today?
I think we should make a long list of things that give us an edge, and then we can start like questioning our assumptions behind those edges, like steroids, steroids and learning. I mean, not an edge. I would say no, but things like that, like unusual combinations, and let ourselves ask our guests who will now become afraid to be a part of this.
Sounds good. And if you keep watching the show, this will be an edge too. Trust us, it will be. So anyway, well, everyone have a good one. We will see you next week. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, there's a little like it thumb. I don't really know what that means when you press it, if it actually does anything cosmic or it just makes you feel good. But hit the up button. If you don't like it, hit the down button. But be gentle on the down button. We're sensitive.
Let's do it. Up.
Yeah, just do the up. Up is good. And subscribe. Subscribe to the channel, and you'll get this every week. And if you're on Vimeo, same thing. Hit the subscribe button, and you'll be notified when we're on live. And if you want to watch it twice a week, you can watch it on Vimeo and YouTube at the same time. Boy, isn't that great? But no, seriously.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. So we will see you folks next week on Life Edge. Have a good one. Thanks, Susan. Take care.
Thank you, Rick.